What is being restored is really an important question, and perhaps some lessons could be learned from someone now distant, but yet still closed and ongoing conflict in Bosnia, where I come from, where centuries of coexistence embodied in culturally rich and hybrid heritage fell under the attack of nationalist extremists in the early 90s. It was the aspect of hybridity and diversity that was not suitable for nationalists' vision of Bosnian multi-ethnic identity. And hence, collective memory was surgically altered to suit nationalist divisions along ethnic lines by removals of people, their monuments, places of worship, records of the history and their art. And you see here the moment of destruction of the famous Ottoman 16th century pearl of Ottoman architecture being targeted, and it was really a symbolic gesture of breaking the coexistence. Now the bridge has been restored, but the coexistence not yet. And here I ask you also to think about, is it enough to restore the symbol? We have a new bridge now, but it has no reference in the society. When the bridge was freshly restored, when you wanted to walk over to the other side, people would throw stones at you, and students in Mostar still learn two different types of and versions of the same history. So ancient hatreds, we were told, were the reason for the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and therefore, religious buildings where these wild Balkan people were throwing bombs at each other. But these churches and mosques and synagogues that stood side by side for centuries were embodiments of a counter-argument that coexistence was not only possible, but indeed prevalent in the Balkans. And this was a kind of planned revision of that history by not only removing the traces of other people's existence, but also a kind of planning into the future. So in my academic side of work, I examined the kind of sadism conducted on architecture in the Balkan War, where it was not about the removal of symbols and kind of recreating landscape and recreating territories, but it was also about making sure that people don't want to live together anymore into the future. And for this reason, people and architecture were tortured in quite similar ways, oftentimes buried under the same pile, and also garbage heaps, humiliations, and symbolic violence was used to forever extinguish one's desire to live together. And when the Dayton Peace Agreement was signed in 1995, this peace agreement brought an end to, combat, but a war perpetuated itself into the other sphere, into the cultural sphere, because the way this peace agreement and a kind of legal framework was set was to, on the one hand, acknowledge the genocide. You guys conquered this territory, well done, you get your piece of land. At the same time, granted people the right to go back to places where they were kicked out. And this kind of situation of unacknowledged genocide, only in the case of Srebrenica, but all the other massacres are still waiting to be acknowledged. And at the same time, the kind of idea that is based on ancient hatreds, why don't you guys live together again? Looks like this now. You have the same city of Mostar in the Franciscan monastery that was just easily damaged. The campanile was tipped down. People there hurried up to triple the height of the campanile and visually dominate the skyline over the city. And in response to that, Muslims built a kind of new concrete megalomaniac structure to reference their Ottoman imperial roots, supposing connections, referencing also sultanic patronage, which of course in this case is not clear, not true. So, in the context of a massive destruction, and this is very different than destruction of symbols like Palmyra or the Mostar Bridge, we have cities that were completely erased and where people have to rebuild, but they are rebuilding also too fast and without reflection, and this is what is happening. So rebuilding without the kind of thinking about legal frameworks and also implications in society, these things need to go hand in hand. Instead of the architecture of defiance, I think we can also learn from these other examples where culture can have agency, the kind of tenacity, if you want, instead of defiance, where people at war use art to signal that they are different from those who destroy them, that they are human, and also as a form of hope. There are some interesting movements now in European landscape. Berlin museums just opened their doors and are engaging refugees to act as museum guides. This could be potentially something interesting, I think, where voice is given to those who are marginalized and not welcomed. At the same time, the question is really, will there be kind of critical reflection on also the origins of the artifacts in the museum and what it means that these people are guiding them. The other maybe encouraging route is to think about the therapeutic role of art. This is an image from the refugee camp where Zaatari, where more than 90,000 people live in Jordan, where artists have grouped themselves together and they make these models of Palmyra out of mud and wooden sticks, materials that is available to them. So when the 100th anniversary of MIT came up, it was about celebration of our campus, or celebration of architecture. I'm working in the Department of Architecture. And at the same time, you have these other things going on in other parts of the world. And for me, the question was, what shall we be saying? How are we celebrating ourselves and to what end? So I came up with this idea to create this kind of physical digital screen that references Palmyra in our Arch of Triumph. So you see here, this is T, M, I, and T, and it reads from both sides of the building. This is, in the center of the campus, which is also, a military and kind of real estate corporation. At the same time, the building itself is named after Jeremy Wiesner, the MIT's 13th president, who is also been influential figure in American de-weaponing nuclear policy. So there's a reference to that. And then this digital image becomes this kind of temporary structure, quite megalomaniac, fitting this, our arch, for 3 weeks, using chain link fencing and these pixels. I engaged purposely this spectacle of images, but distorting the image so you can never really see the arch except when you are just looking straight at it. You always see fragmentary images through the anamorphic projection. And then also the image disappears in 2-minute rhythm. The light changes and this kind of light cancels itself out. The idea here is also to kind of merge and reflect actually really on ourselves on the campus by merging this 3-dimensional, 2-dimensional thing with visually with the campus architecture. When you zoom into so the larger picture is this spectacular image. When you zoom in, there are most of the pixels are laser cut with outlines of buildings that were destroyed in different parts of the world. And this is how they look. I actually have a couple of pixels here hung on the chain. These were designed by project participants in various locations. So this is the whole point, to actually use technology in the project to gather stories and start a conversation. And there was my class that worked on this Cairo Maker Fair where 200 people participated. And different stories are coming out that are quite touching. So Aleppo Citadel, for example, brought by someone at Cairo Maker Fair. And then, Tutankhamun's mask that fell in the museum and the beard fell off and they stuck it in with super glue. But also a lot of noise, like someone, because I asked people different questions here, I asked, okay, what is the heritage that you lived through being destroyed? And someone drew a Titanic. At MIT, I had more time to work with students. Students were writing also larger stories. So this is a student whose family survived the Holocaust and was depicting the synagogue of Munich. Another student is reflecting on our complicity in the world's destruction of rainforests and the indigenous knowledge, kind of immaterial heritage related to that. Most recently, I was in Ramallah and Amman, where new iterations of the projects are being designed, where these workshops also connect generations, also students, and really interesting reflections from the local heritage. For example, someone here drew coordinates of villages and cities that were disappeared or made disappear in Palestine. In Jordan, we got also quite an international crowd, so some of these I cannot yet read, but I have a team also of people there who will help me digitize these stories. So you see the Ishtaq Gate, also someone from New York was there, and this I think is the Dead Sea. And now these images there's a really kind of awful process of then digitizing them, laser cutting them. And you see in these images, this little link here. This is a link to the chain, a Bitcoin chain link. So the idea is that each of these represents a kind of keys of people who became homeless, but also it's a key to the Bitcoin technology, and this is something that my husband Dietmar Offenhuber, who has the information design program at Northeastern University, came up with, which is to use Bitcoin transactions to kind of use them as a notary system to preserve stories told here in a kind of hundreds and hundreds of charts that you are entering when you are doing Bitcoin transactions, and the information becomes indestructible. By multiplying these fences that are referring to borders, the border becomes a gate, you can go through it. And this is also a solidarity building enterprise. As I said earlier, 142 people made this happen together. Students from MIT, 7 different departments, and also, hundreds of funders. The cutouts themselves become jewelry, embodiments of memory to engage also younger viewers of the piece. So there are different levels in which the piece operates. And then, finally, the whole thing destructs itself because the pixels are designed in a way that they don't really stick on the fence when the wind blows. And in the lovely Massachusetts weather, this was happening all the time. So, there's this seductive side of these images, but in reality, a lot of the days looked like this, where these pixels were falling from 10 meters height to the point where I had to kind of take down the installation because it was just, people were getting scared of it. And so this is designed to kind of self-destruct. But what was then interesting is how people deal with it. So when, things were falling on the ground, at night, it was a kind of magical rain on the floor that people would also steal, loot, but also many people were repairing it. So you had to go through this. This is the main gate of the campus, and even if you're ignoring it, you are a participant. Now, the next step of this, and maybe I could also get your help, or I would like to invite you to participate and help this further, is to basically open up, so to use this spectacle to then do something with it. So how does it feed back into the world, which is I'm using this project to open up my classes, also get my students into the refugee camps for educational exchanges, and also, to share stories and to basically share our privilege, because the conditions there are really so touching and devastating that we all can consider ourselves just very, very lucky that we live here. Thank you.